Hey guys, just wanted to give you a quick lesson on part of the legislative branch. Not a lot of the specifics, but sort of the why. Why did our founding fathers set up our legislative branch the way that they did? There was a lot of thought that was put into that decision, and so I'm going to talk about that today. And hopefully, this all makes sense. And if it doesn't, you should ask questions. It's the best way to find out things. So, founding fathers set up our government. They did do this by dividing the separation of powers, divided our government into three branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. They decided to do that so that not one branch would have all the power. The power was divided, right? That's why it's called separating powers. Well, they made a legislative branch. The legislative branch makes laws, and that is actually called Congress, and we'll come back to that. They also created an executive branch, and the executive branch enforces laws, so they make sure that people follow the law, and that is run by the president and his cabinet. And then the third branch is the judicial branch. The judicial branch interprets or judges laws to make sure that laws are fair and follow the Constitution. And that is actually our court system, with the Supreme Court being the highest court in the land. Okay, let's go back to the legislative branch. Why did they decide to set the legislative branch up the way that they did? First of all, let's make sure everyone understands the legislative branch is there to make laws. And we do live in a republic. And what that means is that we have representatives that actually go and make our laws for us. They do that in Washington, D.C., in Congress. Okay. But they weren't sure how they were going to set this up. So there was a lot of debate during the Constitutional Convention about how to go about setting up our Congress. Okay, there were two major plans or ideas for how to do this. One was called the New Jersey Plan. The other one was called the Virginia Plan. Two very different plans. Okay, so understand that to make the laws, they actually vote for representatives in their state, and we send those representatives off to Washington, D.C. to make those decisions for us in making the laws. And what do when they get there? They come up with ideas for laws, they argue about laws, they discuss back and forth on whether it should become a law, and they change the laws, and then they vote. The big part here is that they vote on the laws. So you can imagine, if you had the more people that you have in Congress representing your state, the more power you have, right? Because you get more votes. So as you can imagine, if you're a small state or a large state, meaning if you have few people in your state or if you have a lot of people in your state, that would make a big difference in how much power you have in Congress, right? Votes equals power in Congress. So first was the New Jersey Plan. This really represented small states. What this said was that every state would get equal representation. So that means that no matter how large your state was, if you had a lot of people living in your state, or if you just had a few people living in your state, you would get the same number of representatives. Okay? So maybe each state would get 2 representatives. Even if you had only a few people living in your state, you get 2 representatives. If you had a bajillion people living in your state, you get 2 representatives. As you can imagine, if you were a large state, would you like that plan very much? Well, you probably wouldn't, because you have a lot of people and they feel that they're not being represented as much as the small states. Okay? You figure, hey, I'm a big state, I should get more representatives. No, under the New Jersey Plan, they said everyone gets the same. All right? Small states liked it. Let's move to the Virginia Plan. This was loved by large states. Why? Because representation was based on population. Under this idea, if you're a large state, you probably really like this, because what happened with the Virginia plan was the more people you had in your state, the more representatives you would have in Congress, and which means you would get more votes in Congress when making decisions. And what do we say about votes in Congress? Votes equal, that's right, power, right? So as you can imagine, the Virginia plan here, small states would not like this because they would only get maybe a few votes in Congress. Whereas a large state like Virginia, who had a lot more people there, as a matter of fact, they counted some slaves as part of their population. If you were a large state, you got more votes, which means you had more power. So as you can imagine, under the Virginia plan, if it's based on population, large states loved it, small states hated it. So what did they do? What they did was they compromised. And as a matter of fact, the deal here was that they were going to kind of take a little bit of both and make this a pretty awesome compromise. As a matter of fact, it's called the Great Compromise. So what they do, they took Congress and they split it into two houses, or two groups. One was the Senate, and the other one was the House of Representatives. Okay? The Senate was a lot like the New Jersey plan. In the Senate, it's equal representation. Each state gets 2 senators. Okay? 2. If you're Rhode Island, tiny little bitty state, you get 2 senators. If you are a large state, let's say North Carolina or Virginia, and you have a lot of people living there, you still only get 2 states. All right? People that work there are called senators. In the House of Representatives, however, representation was based on population size. So essentially, if you're a small state, you don't get that many representatives. However, if you're a large state, you get a lot more representatives. As a matter of fact, you get 1 representative for every 5,000 people that are in your state. So if you only have 400,000 people, you haven't even gone over the 500,000 mark, you only get 1. If you've got 1 million people in your state, you take 500,000 times 2, that equals 1 million. You get 2 representatives, okay? So you can figure it out. For every 1 million people, you get 2 representatives in your state. So small states, they don't have a lot of power in the House of Representatives. Large states do, okay? So look at this compromise. They took basically the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan and made it into what we have today, which was this great compromise called the United States Congress. So that's kind of the introductory, the background behind why did they go with a bicameral. This type of system with 2 houses is called bicameral, right? Bi meaning 2, right? This bicameral system was really a great idea, and our founding fathers were pretty smart about compromising with that. When they do go to make laws, they come up with an idea for a law. It actually the law has to be passed. It's called a bill. An idea for a law is called a bill, and that bill has to be passed in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So both groups do have to agree and vote on it and agree on that what that bill is and what that bill says. And if they agree upon it, they vote on it. If it passes, it goes to the president's desk and the president signs it, and then it becomes law. But they do have to agree. Okay, so laws have to move through both houses of Congress before it becomes a law. I hope that helped. If you didn't get it the first time, rewind and watch it again. If you still have questions, come and talk to me, please. Have a great day. Peace. How do I stop this thing? No, I'm still recording.